I'm gonna literally cry. So I call my pediatrician and he's like, just take her to the ER and rule out seizures. They were like, maybe there's a tumor growing on her brain. This felt like a life sentence to us. When my daughter was 6 months old, she had seizures, and ever since sharing that little piece of information online, so many people have slid into my DMs, into my comment sections asking for the full-blown story because their kid is going through something similar. So I figured I'd make a YouTube video about it because there's a lot of information, a lot of parts, and it's just not gonna work in a TikTok video. If there's one thing that I know as a parent, it's that the hardest part about it all is when your kid is in the hospital, tests are being ran, you have no answers, you don't know what caused what's going on, you're Googling all of the symptoms and trying to find different support groups, mom groups, all of the things. I've been there, I know how scary it is, so my only intention or only goal with this video is to hopefully spread awareness. Aaliyah's story specifically is a little bit of a miracle story. Even the neurologist that she was working with was like, I've never seen this happen before. So I hope that if anything, it gives that one mom that's so terrified, so worried, hope, because sometimes that's all you have is hope. And I'm also going to preface this with, I am not looking for opinions on my health choices. This was during the pandemic. At one point, I thought her seizures were related to me getting the jab, and that was so scary for me. I talked to every single doctor, every neurologist, and asked them if there was any chance that it was because I got the jab and I was exclusively breastfeeding at the time. All of them assured me that the amount that would pass through my breast milk is too small to affect anything. Still in the back of my mind, because it ended the way it did, I'm like, are they sure? Like, how do they know? Is there enough research to even back what they're telling me? I don't know, but here we go, let's talk about it. So we had just driven a 15-hour road trip and I got to Utah and got the jab. I was going back and forth between the States and Canada quite often, and if you remember back in the pandemic, you were like, there were ridiculous fines if you weren't quarantined for 14 days after arriving into Canada. And there was, I mean, you had to get the swab at the border. There were so many rules and regulations, and for the sake of ease, I'm like, you know what? It didn't really align with me getting the jab while I was exclusively breastfeeding because it wasn't only my body that I was like directly linked with. I know that sounds woo-woo. Okay, I'm back. So at the time, I wouldn't have gotten the jab until I was done breastfeeding because I saw another mom that's close, mutual friends, get the jab and her kid broke out into a crazy rash, and the only explanation for it was the jab. And I'm referring to it as the jab because I don't know what I can say on YouTube and I don't want this to be censored and taken down and all the things. Okay, so 24 hours after getting the jab, I'll insert a video here of what was going on, but pretty much my daughter started looking up. She started looking up and then regaining focus, looking up, regaining focus. And she almost seemed like glossy-eyed, like not quite there. And she's a 6-month-old baby. Like 6-month-old babies don't really have fluid movements. They're pretty jerky as it is. My mom was like, oh, she just learned how to roll her eyes. Like, how cute. She's picking it up from you. And I was like, no, something seems off about it. Like, that's not her. I just kind of let the first time slide because I noticed it and I was like, haha, that's cute. I noticed it maybe 2 other times throughout the day, and these episodes never lasted for more than like 30 seconds from the time I like caught them, right? On the second day that I noticed one of the episodes, I was holding her upright because she could hold her head up. She's 6 months old, she's almost crawling. I noticed her head kind of dropping. Every single time she'd like roll her eyes and then like drop her head as if she was like dozing off or like losing consciousness, and that scared the living shit out of me. And it was my brother-in-law at the time that was like, no, that's not normal, call your pediatrician immediately. So I call my pediatrician and he's like, just take her to the ER and rule out seizures because then we'll know what to do from there. I took her to the ER immediately, and again, because this is only happening 3 times a day, I wasn't able to stay there long enough for the doctor that was working at the time to catch it, but I did have the video of it happening. Oh, my battery's almost dead. Okay, that's better. I just show him the video that I have and he's like, that doesn't look like anything to me. Like, you shouldn't worry. Her vitals are great. Temp is great. Everything's fine. And I had to push a little bit. There were so many times in this journey that I had to push and advocate for my daughter, which is really sad. And I get it from like a business/healthcare standpoint. Like, they have so many people coming through and working with so many worried parents constantly. You kind of have to like filter and weed out which ones are just exaggerating and which ones like actually know that something's wrong. But anyways, I was like, no, this isn't right. So he's like, I'll send the video to the neurologist at the children's hospital. And I was like, great. Like, that's the least you could do. So he sent the video and the neurologist got back right away and was like, I want to see her. She needs an EEG done. So we headed to the children's hospital, dropped my other daughter off with my sister. Keep in mind, I told that doctor that was working at the ER, I just got the job. Like, I don't know if it was that. And he's like, there's no way that could have passed through your breast milk. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So we go to the children's hospital. She is ordered to get an overnight EEG. The saddest thing ever, if you've ever had a tiny kid or even a kid get an EEG, they like put all like the little nodes on their head and they have to glue them down and wrap gauze around their head. I'll put a picture here. And we were pretty much just to like make sure she slept as much as she could so that they could look at her brain patterns. She also had an MRI done that came back perfect, nothing on her MRI. And a genetic test was also ordered that also came back nothing there. So the reason for the genetic test is they wanted to rule out tuberous sclerosis because that's just tumors. They were like, maybe there's a tumor growing on her brain or whatever causing the seizures, whatever. The EEG though did show a specific brainwave pattern that's very chaotic and it's called hypsarrhythmia. As soon as the neurologist saw that, he was able to confirm she had infantile spasms and he diagnosed her with West syndrome. And if you know anything about West syndrome, this felt like a life sentence to us because not only was this going to majorly impact her day-to-day, but she was also going to regress, is what he told us. He looked me in the eyes and said, don't be shocked if she starts regressing developmentally, forgetting how to sit up, forgetting how to babble, just turning more baby-like. Kids that have West syndrome, there's some that are 5 years old and don't know how to walk. Like, it was so overwhelming, and I remember being in the hospital Googling all of these symptoms, Googling this syndrome, Googling infantile spasms, what could be causing it. And a lot of the cases don't have causes. Like sometimes they just can't find a cause for what happened or whatever. Another thing I should mention is when my daughter was 2 months old, she fell off my mom's bed when my mom was watching her. And I also thought maybe it was a brain injury because that's another big thing. Again, like her brain on the MRI looked absolutely perfect and they didn't see anything. So anyways, that diagnosis was really hard pill to swallow. It was terrifying. And our treatment plan was to put her on a really heavy steroid prednisolone for 30 days and then do another EEG to see if it kind of like reverted things back to normal because there have been cases that's the best course of action. And I was supposed to take her to the pediatrician's office every single day to get her blood pressure checked because with this high of a dose, it can cause further issues blood pressure wise. So she was on prednisolone for about 24 hours and that's when we saw her get really, really cranky. I went and bought like a structured baby carrier because she was constantly whining, constantly fussing, so upset, so irritable. She gained, I'm not even kidding, like 5 pounds in 2-3 days. Like she only wanted to eat. She developed what they call moon face, like she just gained tons of weight. It was the 3rd day of her being on prednisolone that we took her in to get her first blood pressure check. And again, she's so irritated, she's so irritable, it's so hard. We go into the pediatrician's office and the nurse that was working there tried to take her blood pressure with like an adult cuff on her leg and she's a 6-month-old baby, that's not gonna work. Her manager nurse comes in and is like, do you need help? So she tries to help her. My daughter's too irritated, too fussy, won't hold still, so obviously that's gonna raise her blood pressure. And I suggested, like, can I just breastfeed her while you guys are doing this because she'll calm down, she'll hold still. So I start breastfeeding her. They both are struggling to get her blood pressure and eventually they're just like, you know what, that's fine, like she's fine, you're fine, just leave. And I'm like, no, you're not gonna brush me off like that. So I went downstairs to the ER and I asked one of the guys at the ER, I'm like, I just need you to take my kid's blood pressure. He's like, no problem, we have an electronic machine. And he's like, we have a little baby cuff, all the things. He's like, just come in, like we won't charge you for it or anything. Luckily enough, my daughter relaxed, she was calm, they took her blood pressure and I sent those numbers to my pediatrician that sent them to my neurologist. Immediately, I received a text back from my pediatrician saying the neurologist wants you to stop the medication immediately. And I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, that is way too high for a kid. It was in this moment that I'm like, okay, well, I'll stop the medication, but like, what's the plan moving forward? Like that was supposed to be what got her better was 30 days on this medication, right? So as a mom, I'm like spiraling. We stopped the medication and 24 hours later, we suddenly can't get in touch with our neurologist. We're calling his office. We're trying to go through my pediatrician. Like nobody can reach our neurologist to get further guidance as to what we should be doing. Now at this point, my daughter's seizures had stopped. They stopped probably 48 hours after her being on the medication, but just because they stopped doesn't mean that her brain pattern is normal. Kids can have a hypsarrhythmia brain pattern but show no symptoms, no seizures. It's the hypsarrhythmia you want to treat the root cause rather than the seizures. Anyways, so I'm like, okay, no, like we need further guidance as far as what we're doing. So I'm calling. Izzy called and yelled at the neurologist receptionist office lady, and I felt so bad because I immediately received a call from the neurologist, and he was so upset with me because Izzy had just yelled at his office lady and his office lady went home crying. There was so much contention. This really isn't like important as far as the story goes, but he told me, put her back on the medication. And I'm like, why would I do that? His response was, we need to see if the blood pressure thing was a fluke. And I'm like, it wasn't a fluke. Like, her blood pressure stated one thing. Why would we put her back on the medication? And he's like, no, just put her back on the medication. And I'm like, okay, I need a second opinion. So I got online, researched high and low for somebody that was well versed in infantile spasms. Dr. Hussein at UCLA, I reached out to his office and I'm like, I just need an appointment. I told him I have the MRI, I have all of the things, I just need an appointment with him. I need his opinion. We paid $1,400 for one online Zoom appointment, and I was ready to pick up and leave to LA if I needed to meet with him in person or whatever. I couldn't get an appointment until the following week. So over the course of the 3-4 days that she wasn't on any medication, seizures stopped and she started acting completely normal, almost crawling. Her regressing developmentally didn't really align with what was going on with her little human body. And so it was like, no, I'm not putting her back on a medication until somebody can confirm that her brainwave pattern still has hysterythmia. I know it's unheard of that 3 days on a steroid could fix things, but from what I'm seeing and what my daughter is showing me, it has fixed things. She's perfect. She's back to herself. So I meet with a doctor at UCLA 3 days later, and he's like, you are completely right. You need another EEG, preferably a 24-hour at-home EEG, before we can put her back on a medication. And I'm like, oh, thank God. He said something along the lines of, if she has tuberous sclerosis, if there was like a tumor or whatever, I'd tell you to come right away and we would operate on her brain, do whatever we needed to. But because there's no direct cause, he's like, get the EEG. So I called my pediatrician and I'm like, can you order me a 24-hour EEG? He's like, absolutely. So he ordered it, and the next day they came to my house and did a 24-hour EEG. So sad because we went through the EEG process again, me holding her down, the lady putting on all of the things, and it was so terribly sad. But she pretty much had like wires connected from her head to this little monitor that we had to follow her around with. I had to sleep on the floor with her. It was a whole thing. Oh, and it was also video monitor, just to be able to match up like her brainwave patterns with her movement and what she was doing, if she was sleeping, if she wasn't. So anyways, that went fine. She still was acting completely normal. We got a call 24-ish hours after that, and the neurologist relayed the information to the nurse to tell us, your daughter no longer has infantile spasms. She doesn't have hysterythmia, but she does have seizure tendencies, and you will be further contacted as far as what you can do or if there's a medication that you can use to treat those seizure tendencies. And I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna literally cry. All I could think of at the time was that I could leave all of the Facebook mom groups, because it was so scary watching everybody post videos of their kids having seizures, their kids not being able to walk. They're like, I'm no longer relevant to those moms. Not in like an entitled way, don't hear what I'm not saying, but almost just like a breath of fresh air, realizing I could leave that group and I no longer needed to look for people that are going through something similar. And that's kind of where things left off. We moved to Canada a month prior to moving down to Utah, hence why I got the job, because we were going back and forth. You want dates? My daughters love dates so much. Here you go.
So much.
Don't eat the pits, okay? I don't even know where I left off now. I was mentioning we moved. So yeah, we were back down in Utah just picking up the last of our stuff to move to Canada. So this made our 1 week stay a 1 month stay. And we were headed back up to Canada, and we were supposed to just follow up with a neurologist there, send them the MRIs, the EEGs, all the things, and they could do annual checkups and give us further guidance as far as these seizure tendencies go. Little did I know that it's really hard to find a pediatrician in Vancouver, but also like see any sort of specialist. It was about like 6 months later that my daughter had a double ear infection and we were in the hospital, and I saw the doctor and I was like, my daughter had seizures at 6 months old and I need somebody to follow up with. Like, I need you to refer me to a specialist. And he was like, oh, okay, no problem. I'll like get somebody to call you, whatever. It has now been a year. No. It has now been 2 years that I've been on this wait list to see a neurologist and get a follow-up EEG done, and just get further guidance as to what's going on. If there's anything, hopefully there's not. That appointment is tomorrow. And that's why I'm filming this video, because everything's fresh on my mind. I'm going to be talking to doctors about it. And yeah, like, it's been a miracle. My daughter's 2.5. She's so incredibly smart. She's not behind on any of her milestones. If anything, she's advanced. And it's just something that I definitely thought was off the table, like not even in our control when she was diagnosed with infantile spasms or West syndrome. I'll give another update in one of my future vlogs after her EEG and after we get results, but moral of the story, have hope, because although a Google article could say it's gonna be a whole life thing, although sometimes things can seem terrifying, that's not always the case. And in our case specifically, a miracle happened. I don't know, but some people could say God did this, like it was all God. And I am just so grateful that she's 2.5 years old and thriving. You wanna wear it over?
Yeah.
That's my 2-year-old that keeps interrupting this video. But like I said, I'll share updates in future vlogs. This is not my normal video whatsoever. I didn't think I would ever be making a full-on video just about this, but I do think it's important to spread epilepsy awareness and help other moms feel less alone that are going through something similar. So stick around, subscribe, like this video, comment below if you've gone through something similar or if you know somebody that has. And that is that. I love you so much, and I'll see you next time.